Hi there, Virtual Ron from Gula Tech Adventures here, introducing this week's video all about browser security. In this episode, Ron sits down with Eric Cornelius, former Chief Technology Officer at Cylance and now the CEO of Conceal. They kick things off by exploring the endpoint security market and dive deep into the wide range of web-based cyber threats that exist today. Eric also demonstrates a one-click identity hijack attack, followed by an in-depth discussion on web security technologies like browser isolation, virtual desktops, and managed attribution networks. After the video, don't miss Gula Tech's latest funny animated short, The Bat Browser, where the world's greatest detective learns how to stay anonymous online. Enjoy the interview and don't forget to subscribe.
Hi there, it's Ron Gula from Gula Tech Adventures, and this week I sit down with the Conceal CEO, Eric Cornelius, to talk all about browser security and the state of the security market. Eric, how's it going?
Going great. Thanks for having me, Ron.
Thanks for traveling all the way out here to the East Coast. And, you were out here for the GCIS conference, right?
That's correct.
I got a chance to see you talk yesterday, and we're going to go use some of your slides and whatnot. So how did you get here? Like, what's your background? How did you become the CEO of Conceal?
Sure. I mean, long story short, I started out, I think, a lot of the way, or the same way a lot of guys my age started out, where, I had access to a computer young, well before the time of the internet. I had an aptitude for using it. In order to make use of it at that day and time, you actually had to have some skills, and thus began the journey, right? College, computer science background, got a scholarship, ended up as an Army civilian at the Army Research Laboratory, got introduced immediately to non-traditional computer type computing systems, what we might now call IoT. Also got introduced to critical infrastructure and the ICS mission, which I found very fascinating. So I moved up to the Idaho National Lab. That mission also took me to Department of Homeland Security. And then that was about a decade, and I decided to try the private sector, and as an early employee at Cylance, did a myriad of jobs there. Ultimately ended up becoming the CTO, and then did a couple of other little hops, and here I am.
So that's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you worked at INL, right? So one of our companies, Gravwell, the founders there, they came out of that. And I have a lot of respect for the national labs that are out there. What kind of cyber exposure did you get to at INL?
I was on the cyber teams with the Gravwell guy, Corey. He's a good personal friend. We were doing, primarily my team was doing assessments on critical infrastructure systems. So we were, that was sort of the early days of what is now called public-private partnership, where the government was partnering with large organizations whose resources made a significant impact to the security of humanity. So in this case, the industrial control systems manufacturers, think Siemens, ABB, really big companies. And we'd partner, and they would bring their systems in, and we would do cybersecurity assessments of these systems. And the nice thing about that is it was scale 1 = 1, right? These aren't digital twins. They're not pieces and parts. It's the full-scale operating system, and we were able to do some really deep, meaningful work and provide, I think, a lot of value to the American public and to the world.
And I've talked with some former INL folks about this. I don't think this is classified, but like you get basically a copy, like one of the real power things, right? So you set it up, you run it, and you do all the different kind of attacks, right? Reverse engineering, RF, all that kind of stuff. Looking for implants from China, all that kind of good stuff, right? You find anything interesting?
I've seen a ton of interesting stuff.
That's always good. I like vague answers like that, which is good. How much of the INL work did that prepare you to eventually become the CTO of Cylance?
I mean, I think having a deeply technical background is important. And the thing I appreciate about my prior experience is that I got to learn about large-scale, highly impactful, non-traditional thinking, kind of outside-the-box attack vector development. And I think that helped me a lot because Cylance is a defensive technology trying to be ahead of the adversaries and block threats that you haven't currently seen before. So I think those skill sets are directly related.
And Cylance, there's so much we can talk about there because, of course, we're filming this in 2025, and we've got the entire state of the endpoint detection and response, market out there. But at the time, Cylance and CrowdStrike kind of emerged as the people who were upsetting, Carbon Black too, right? Upsetting the status quo of the antivirus industry. What do you recall of the early days of Cylance, and how does that kind of manifest today?
Yeah, so the early days is a very interesting market problem because when you come out and say, I have a better mousetrap for endpoint security, there's no white space in the market. 100% of desktops, laptops, any device that could have AV did. And so there was no like, hey, we have this new cool thing. People have never heard of it. You're really trying to go up against large, capable incumbents and with a disruptive technology. And it was a great experience for me to be able to, feel what it was like to go through that market, deal with the challenges, develop POCs and sales methodologies, and more importantly, the technology that really did bring a higher level of value. And in all those years since, we've kind of hit a similar spot now to where the EDR market, the modern, next gen platform kind of thing has, again, fully saturated the market. Maybe not taking everything, but the incumbents have increased their capability. You've got people like CrowdStrike and SentinelOne and all the guys still doing the good work. But now those companies are also having to expand their TAM because we're back to there not being much white space left. And so you start to see this term platformization come back. What is old is new again, right? And so, we've gone from being in those early days, we were the point solution. We argued to everyone, you don't want a big incumbent. You want a small, best-in-class technology for these point solutions where it really matters the most. And now we're back to, you need a singular platform that has all these little widgets in it that can do all of the things.
And then how do you feel about sort of the strategic bet that Cylance made where they were basically going to analyze files to see if a file was good or bad, right? That's what one of the classic problems in malware. But almost everybody else, CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, they were doing telemetry, right? They're going to look for telemetry and find hostile things that were kind of odd.
Yeah, I think the answer was you need to do both. Right. And Cylance had unparalleled efficacy in the determination of, is this particular executable file good or bad? That was an incomplete solution. Right. And I think hence why those companies are still like CrowdStrike, the Falcon platform's got 87 gazillion modules now. And it's because there's a lot of attack surface. So if you're really going to try and be a singular vendor that meets all of these, tries to answer the mail on each of these attack surfaces, you're going to need a lot of modules because instrumenting a file is one thing. Instrumenting a file system is another thing. Instrumenting the network is yet another thing. And then we've got the cloud, and then you've got containers, and you've got, every buzzword you've ever heard has its own unique security challenges.
So it's funny. I saw you talk at the GCIS conference yesterday, and one of the slides you put up was this one. Stop me if you heard this, right? Identity's the new perimeter. All these things are the new perimeters and whatnot. And when you think about the EDRs, they all have great capabilities now, but they are basically waiting to get hit and then alerting and leaping into action. So what do you think of the market now with EDRs, and where does it fit in the entire security sort of ecosystem?
I think to this day, EDR is a critical capability, right? At the end of the day, every laptop has an operating system. That operating system needs, call it a first line, call it a last line, whatever it is. You need the ability to interdict and take action based on telemetry you're gathering from the operating system. So I don't think an EDR platform is going anywhere. I think it's a critical part and it's here to stay. It is by no means a panacea. There are a lot of other attack surfaces. In particular, one of the spaces that I'm currently focused on is the browser, where the EDR platform cannot see into the browser. So to an EDR platform, you see Chrome.exe is running. Chrome.exe is in fact not malware. Ergo, we should allow Chrome.exe to run. And then you see ancillary kind of artifacts coming off of this, right? Where you say Chrome.exe wants to download a file. Should we or should we not allow that to happen? Should we or should not allow that to run? There are things that can be done, but you're really blind to what I consider to be the whole in all of this, or to use my perimeter analogy from my slides the other day. I said the browser, we have the browser or the perimeter. All these things are the perimeter, and I agree with that. Everything's the new perimeter, but the browser is the gate, right? It's the secret castle door that your users spend 75% of their time engaging with this browser to download and execute arbitrary third-party code from websites that we have no visibility into whether or not it's safe, it's good, it's all of the things.
So I'm going to put up the slide and you can react to this, but I thought it was really good in your talk where you went through all the different types of browser attacks that are out there, everything from client side, hijacking of the browser's privilege, all the way to just compromising the browser. So what are some of these that you think are the most important these days?
Yeah, I think the browser has it presents three separate attack surfaces, which as a former exploit developer, I think is great. I love a target that's got three legit attack surfaces. The first, as you mentioned, is the browser itself, right? I mean, Chrome or Edge, or you pick your browser of choice, is in fact an executable file running on your endpoint in the context of the user. And if you're like me, you're running as admin. I don't think everyone's got the least privilege use case down pat yet. So if I manage to compromise that browser, I own your box, right? And I threw up some statistics yesterday where Chrome has something like 68% of global corporate traffic, which is a lot. And they had almost a CVE per day for the entirety of last year. So just the one attack surface is quite robust. The second is the browser's job is quite literally to go to websites, download arbitrary code from those websites and render it for you, aka execute it. And there's a tremendous amount of attack opportunity there. And then the third is the user. I can attack the user and use the browser as the vehicle, or what I call is the modern attack proxy, where I can use your browser as a proxy to launch attacks on you, the user, or your operating system. And I can get you to do things like click this link, right? So the categories you were showing before, I think adversary in the middle is kind of the most germane these days. And there's a tagline you may or may not have heard that said adversaries don't hack in, they break in, or they log in, right? Because hacking is hard, no matter how you cut it. It's not like in the movies where it takes 2 seconds and you're in through the NSA, right? It takes legit research, development, exploitation development, like payload, all of the things you have to do. It's just so much easier to say like, hey, can I have your password? And users, despite all of the very high quality human training that's out there, they click links. Statistically, they click links. And with this adversary in the middle attack in particular, it's very difficult. Once you click that link and it opens up, the problem that makes the mirror user typically unable to identify it is that it is legitimate, right? It takes you to a legitimate SSO. You enter your legitimate credentials. If you're using an authenticator app, you get your code, you take your code, your push notification, whatever it is. And so it feels okay to you. Your spidey sense isn't tipped off. But then the adversary just harvested your credentials. And now I'm you for the length of time that session is valid, which in today's world is typically too long.
So you had a really good video on that. But before we get to that video, a lot of the stuff you went through yesterday, I think it's going to be interesting to our users. One of them in particular was the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? You've got the NIST cybersecurity framework, and I thought it was pretty cool how you highlighted that here's all of it, and I think a lot of people are familiar with it, but not a lot of people are familiar with the fact that all that stuff in red is actually stuff for the browser.
Yeah, the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So
I apologize. Yeah.
Yeah, all good. I like the MITRE ATT&CK framework. It's a really nice kind of lexicon of modern attacker TTPs, right? And puts it out in a way that defenders can go through and, see the problems, understand what is the TTP, what is the typical recommended mitigation for that, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, when you do this overlay like we have here and really kind of take a look at how many of the TTPs that are described by the attack framework are either relevant tangentially or directly or only browser focused, it's pretty incredible. Like when you zoom out on that, you could see it's a significant portion of the attack framework where the browser is either an accomplice or the primary actor in accomplishing this goal.
Bonus points for using Marvin the Martian as well in that slide. Now, another thing that I wanted to get to before we do this demo is just I don't think people understand how much code the browsers actually run when they're just going to a random website. And you had another good example. And the thing I liked about this one is that people can do this on their own, right? Every browser has got the ability to do this. So what am I looking at here?
Yeah, so this is a screenshot from CNN.com. And this tool you see down here on the bottom is actually just the web developer console. Every browser comes with one. They're typically disabled. So you as the user would have to go so far as to click one single button to enable this thing. And then any website you view, you can pull this up. And what you see there, those statistics down on the bottom, those are actually terrifying statistics. And this is what I want people to really wrap their mind around, is it speaks to the magnitude of the problem here. So that 245, that is the number of third-party domains that load data into the context of your browser. I mean, all I did was go to CNN.com. I didn't click anything. I didn't do anything. And 245 different domains loaded code into my browser. And that next number, 9,922, that's the number of actual resources for a total of over a gigabyte of data. I mean, that's a ton, man. I don't know how you measure things, but to me, that's a lot. And this is just CNN.com with no interaction, right? And so if you start to kind of extrapolate this out, and the next couple of slides, I don't know if you want to show them or not, but they go through and kind of show the magnitude of the problem, where even someone who is a sophisticated cybersecurity practitioner with years of experience, you can't take the time to go through. If you look at that, it's over 14,000 lines of code, and that's in a single script. And you can just see there's hundreds of scripts getting loaded there. And it's just impossible to make an educated decision about should I not allow this material, this code, to be executed in my browser.
And it's interesting because, again, there's a lot of tradecraft out there, right? But the way people, whether they're ransomware or they're nation states, if they want to target you, I can advertise to you. right? I can target, white males in Idaho or, whatever who want to buy certain things and stuff like that. Next thing you know, I'm probably targeting browsers for those 300 or 400 people. I can put code. If I got a 0-day exploit, it can go right to those people that I'm looking for. So this is fairly serious stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. So there's multiple paths to that outcome there. So one is, kind of the broadcast method you just described, where I can target a particular demographic, right? And I can use the advertising network, which a lot of that code you were looking at earlier is really focused on auctioning off and loading third-party advertisements to put in front of you. So that whole targeting system actually just occurred because advertisements are great at targeting a very specific demographic. It's just that you're viewing something that's legit. If I win that auction and I put a 0-day there, that's totally possible. The other thing that happens is I might want to target you personally, right? Or your organization specifically. And what I can do is research through open source intelligence, find out, where do you live? What are your interests? What other websites are you likely to visit? If you're into horses and you live in Dallas or wherever, then maybe I compromise the feed store website. I would be willing to bet that the feed store doesn't have the best cybersecurity budget. Maybe they're running on an antiquated version of WordPress, soft target, exploit, deliver to target. So there is just, the point here is that the amount of attack surface is ever increasing at the same time that our dependence on the browser is also increasing.
And how much of this is keeping the browser patched for the users to do versus, look, there's hostile JavaScript out there, and just going to the website can be an issue?
Yeah, well, those are both. The answer to that is yes. So there, as we discussed earlier, was a CVE per day for Chrome last year. So we need to do some diligence and stay on top of that patching. But despite all the diligence you may do, there's an example of a small city in California having their legit city of government website compromised and downloading a very, very aggressive piece of malware. There's nothing for the user to do. That's a completely legitimate government website, and if you view that, simply going there was enough to execute that malicious code.
I think a lot of people might not believe how easy it really is. And again, in your talk yesterday, which I was really glad to see because it really framed this really well. Thanks for letting me use the slides here. You got a video of doing one of these hijack type sessions. So let me bring this up and talk me through what's going on here.
Yeah. So what you're looking at here is an open source framework called EvilGenix. And it's, probably the most popular version or tool for perpetrating these adversary in the middle attacks. And fundamentally, all you're doing is you are creating some content. In this case, it's a phishing email that has a link that hosts an SSO or IDP endpoint on your architecture or on your infrastructure, rather. And I entice you, the user, to visit it and simply give me your credentials. Right. So in my scenario earlier where I said it's much easier just to ask you for your password than to actually hack in, that's what this is. And this is just a clear demo of, and you can look through here, there's not hardly any. There are a couple of things you might notice, but the average user isn't going to notice it. And the authentication workflow is 100% legit. So this is actually our endpoint for authentication. There's nothing our standard user is going to be able to do here. And you even get the two-factor. It just looks and feels right. And so what ends up happening is the adversary, and you'll see here, they're successful, they cheer, and then they possess your credentials, right? And they're able to just go impersonate you to access your corporate resources or any other service upon which you are able to log in with this. And that is kind of the other issue, is that nowadays, I'm sure you've noticed, you can go download an app and then create an account with your SSO credential. So I could, ostensibly create new accounts as you with this cred, and you would never even know it. And,
for people who are not, into the hacking and the technology, and a lot of times people say, oh, they stole my password. And I think the general public doesn't realize that when you log in and you authenticate, you get like this big blob of text or that cookie. If I have that cookie, I'm you.
Yeah.
Right. So that's crazy.
Yeah. There's a whole dark art to the way modern authentication works. But the thing you're concerned with is, we generally refer to it as a token. And that token is only valid for some period of time, right? But it's ultimately, that's how modern authentication works, is you provide your password to the secret system, the identity provider. They give you this token, and then you go use that token to log into the various services who have integrated with the IDP, and they accept it.
So you're new in the seat as the CEO of Conceal. You have a lot of plans. So we're not announcing anything today. We're not going into all the different things. We have talked about Conceal on the show a couple times. browser plugin. We had some, what was the words? Not the disinformation, the managed attribution, right?
Yeah.
And we got you can replace desktops and stuff like that. So just talk about that in general. What are some of the things that you think, what are some of the technologies that are going to be leveraged by Conceal, but also like just the market in general? What should the general public who's watching this be thinking about when it comes to protecting access to their SaaS apps, to their browsers, to their private data, and how can they stay private online?
Yeah, great question. So, we have two primary domains which we participate in the economies for, and one is the browser security, which I think is a really critical space, as for all of the reasons we just described. We choose to be a browser plugin as to not have to replace the browser in totality, and we can provide a lot of capability. One, as you alluded to, is this VDI replacement. So back in the day, if you wanted to provide secure access to non-managed devices, and that's one of the huge problems that I won't say it goes unmentioned, but it's not focused on as much as representatively, I'll say. It's a real problem, right? So if you're an insurance company, a lot of your agents might be 1099 employees, and therefore you can't forcibly make them install an agent of any variety, EDR, a browser plugin, anything, yet you're still in this conundrum where they need access to your sensitive corporate resources. So what do you do, right? And so what we do is we've got a remote browsing capability that we wrap in an SSO IDP workflow that allows an administrator to provision access to these apps, generating a URL, which you will then provide to the third-party contractors or whoever you're trying to provide access to. They click the URL, it pops a modal, they see the applications that the administrator has allocated to them, and when they click on that, we handle all the authentication machinery behind the scenes. The nice thing is that then gives you, the administrator, controls over them. So because you're running through our cloud, you're able to say, I don't want this contractor to be able to download files from my Salesforce instance or screenshot or copy paste or whatever, right? So you have a much finer level of control than you would over a user in normal circumstances. But the other benefit is they have no idea of how to actually log in. So they can't go to salesforce.com/login and enter a credential. They simply don't have a credential, not that one that they know of.
And one thing you said there I want to emphasize is that there's a lot of companies in this space, and we'll talk about some of the big ones in a minute, just where it is with the market. But if you're just a plugin, you can only do things in the browser. And if you're just carrying people's traffic, you really can't benefit from that. And Conceal does a little bit of both, which gives you a lot of functionality to play in a lot of these different markets. How does that relate to managed attribution, and why should somebody care about that?
Yeah, so we have the second domain which we specialize in is managed attribution, and your average civilian is probably not going to care about that too much, but financial institutions, government agencies, they care about it in the sense that the purpose is if you want to access the dark web for research purposes, or the financial use case is
or my competitor's website, right?
Or your competitor's website. That's right. That is a good use case for the average Joe. But if you're a financial institution, you're doing anti-money laundering research, you don't really want the Mexican cartel or whoever it is to be able to provide attribution to you. So we have a software-defined network that we can overlay on top of public cloud infrastructure that provides a tremendous amount of capability to allow you to, under very strictly controlled guidelines that you are in charge of, dictate how your traffic will appear and where it will appear from, and under the context of how that's going to work. Given the browser plugin, we can actually bring those two capabilities together to bring to bear something that no one else in the industry can bring. And I think that's really what's exciting about our future.
And today, again, 2025, early in the year, we still got the typhoons going on, right? We got all the routers, being compromised. And if I've got compromised routers at my telco and my ISP, what does managed attribution do in that case for me?
Yeah, it's not so much the managed attribution as it is the encryption, which is one component thereof, right? At the end of the day, if your underlying infrastructure is compromised, what that means is that an adversary can see the data that goes over that pipe, so to speak. If your certificate negotiation happened over that pipe, they can ostensibly see that as well. We won't get into the intricacies of cryptography and how to break or how to defeat that for every moment in time. But at the end of the day, our software-defined managed attribution network has pre-negotiated, pre-positioned keys. And so if you were to have your traffic or the underlying network compromised, your traffic would still be safe.
Excellent. Now, in many ways, when we talked about Cylance and CrowdStrike, there was a lot of love and hate to the operating system vendors. And in many ways, the browser people, whether they're doing a browser plugin or trying to carry traffic, you still got to work with Chrome. You still got to work with Safari. So for somebody who thinks, I'm just going to stick with Chrome and Safari, and just using what does Chrome have for isolation, the privacy browser, that kind of stuff. What are they leaving on the table? Like how much of that is really getting to them?
I mean, that's sort of a reframing of the question of why isn't Microsoft the best security vendor on the planet? And it's not because they can't, right? It's just because they don't and won't. And even with the enterprise browser effort that Chrome is making, to start with, they don't have dominance on the market, right? So if let's pretend Chrome was the most amazing secure browser in the world, I would just use Edge as an employee, right? And so you need to have multi-browser coverage. And I think that's really going to prevent any operating system vendor or browser vendor from solving this problem in totality. That said, I do think that the browser vendors could do a much better job right out of the box. There's so much capability that they're just not implementing. And that's okay. I mean, to start with, most browsers are free, so you get what you pay for. And they're really trying to provide a vehicle for a user to access the web, right? There's not any space in that title to say to securely access the web. So that then it comes back on us, the operators of the enterprise, the network, to provide that layer of security.
Are there differences between browsers on the desktop and browsers on mobile devices like iPads and iPhones?
Esoterically, no. There's not any differences. I'd argue your phone is just a computer. That's 100% true. But it's a computer that's running a different operating system. The implementation of the browsers is different. They leverage different APIs. So from a technical implementation perspective, then yeah, they're different. But from a risk acceptance kind of business management, as long as there's support for everything, then there shouldn't really be much difference.
I'm always like to remind people that, when you're on your phone and you get a text, somebody who can text you is almost one click away from controlling what you're browsing to, right? Send you a link and that sort of thing. And I think a lot of people, they don't understand that Slack could be compromised. Somebody gets compromised on the inside of a network. It could be a Zoom message. It could be all these different things. But ultimately, once somebody gets you, you're going to click and put that into a browser.
That's 100% correct. I mean, even QR codes, right? The ultimate goal is not to compromise Slack, is not to compromise your SMS. It is to compromise you, right? To cause you to intentionally open a malicious link in your browser.
So when it comes to enterprises and even small businesses that want to protect, their browsing, on one hand, great, patch the browsers, patch the operating systems, make sure you have email phishing, all that kind of good stuff. But when you're looking at a way to get people to think about, is my browser secure? You mentioned a bunch of different things, and I wouldn't mind if you just kind of went through them one more time. Like, what is the managed attribution? What is the, the different kind of attacks you have to worry about, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a relatively complex question to answer from an enterprise perspective. So we'll just look, to be honest, at the three attack surfaces, right? You have the people, you have the browser itself, and then you have the websites that you're visiting. Each of those needs to be addressed, right? You need to educate your employees about phishing, and you need to put as many stop gaps in place as possible to stop them from clicking malicious links. And that is kind of very tightly tied to the websites we're visiting. So one, we don't want you to inadvertently go to a website. And our paradigm, by the way, is that all websites are bad all the time. Nobody gets a pass, not even Google.com. Every time you visit a website, we have a security engine and we scan the content of Google.com. What is going to be executed in your browser? Is it or is it not good? Right? Because the example I used earlier was the small town in California whose city's government webpage got compromised. That ostensibly is a legitimate website. There's no doubt about that. However, in this instance, it was serving malware, and that's a security problem. So you need to put something in place that has the capability of analyzing that in real time, every time that your users go to it. But you can reduce a lot of that noise through the third piece, which is just content filtering, right? And have some corporate policies in place that say, look, we're not going to let our employees visit sites that are hosted in North Korea. Sorry, or Iran, or Russia, or China, or wherever, right? And this is a business decision. Some places they might have hey, we're a free corporate environment, peace and love, like our guys can go wherever they want. Fine, that's your corporate risk viewpoint. My perspective is that you can shrink a lot of the attack surface simply by shrinking it, right? And if you try and minimize non-corporate relevant behavior on your corporate-owned devices, that's a pretty solid first step.
Excellent. Well, I want to close with how you want people to contact you. I know you're on LinkedIn, but what's the best way if somebody wants to engage Conceal? I know you guys are in the process of announcing a variety of new things, probably, I'd like to think sometime before RSA this year, but what would you like to let the users know on how to contact you?
Sure. I mean, if you want to contact me directly, I'm on LinkedIn. My email address is eric.cornelius@conceal.io. You can visit our website at conceal.io. There's a contact form there. Email address is there. So yeah, just don't be shy.
Excellent. All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. Thanks for taking the job over at Conceal. You're new in the seat, and I wish you a lot of luck. I think this market is a really, really market that's a big, ready to get just kind of reimagined, if you will, because it's still the number one attack surface that's out there. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. I'm Ron Gula. I hope you have a great week. Connect with us on LinkedIn. I'll have Eric's contact info in the notes. Hope you have a great day.